So this video is on Unit 13, Lessons 1 and 2. And Lesson 1, you'll notice I'm actually on Lesson 2 because Lesson 1 is all vocab words. You really need to read through these and make sure you know what each vocab word means and what they are asking you to find when you see that vocab word. You can do this throughout the unit, but you really should read through them now and make sure you maybe highlight ones that are brand new to you and make sure you really know them. Some of these should be review. I will give you a sheet in class next time I see you that will give you kind of examples of some of these new words on, like, it'll give you a situation and they'll tell you how to find what that vocab word is asking you to find. So don't worry too much about Lesson 1. Just make sure you look through it and you know all of these words before your test, ideally. But before we move on, because we're going to have to do these things within the next couple of lessons. So moving on to Lesson 2. Lesson 2 is pretty much kind of a review plus teaching you how to use the calculator to find some of these things. Now, we're just going to go through an exercise, and that's pretty much it for this lesson 2. So in exercise 1, they're talking about 18 quiz grades in a advanced calc class. So here are the quiz grades themselves, and we're going to use that data to answer these questions. So in part A, they want the mean, the median, and the quartiles, and then to construct a box and whisker plot. Now, you could do this by hand, but I want to show you how to do it on the calculator because the calculator, A, will save you a ton of time, and B, it will also find other things that you're going to need to know how to find down here. So I'm just going to show you how to do it there to begin with. So you definitely should know how to find mean and median. They didn't ask for the mode, but you should also know how to find that as well. So here's where you're going to go. You are going to go on your screen when you're at the home screen. You're going to go down here to this green. It's right in the middle. It's where you enter in lists and data. Oh, and of course it's, oh no, it's right here. Okay. Now, you are going to have to put up here, depending on how many lists you need, we're only going to be working with one variable, stats though. You need to put anything up here. You could call it whatever you want. Usually we put up there like a word that actually goes with what we're measuring. So I put grades. You could have put quiz. You could have put just a G for grades. You can put anything, but you need a name up here because when you tell the calculator to tell you like the average and the quartiles, you need to be able to select which list you put it in, so you have to give it a name. Then you're just going to type in all of those quiz grades or whatever it is you're measuring. Then, this is important, you need to go back to the home screen and you're going to go over here to the calculator button, the first one that looks like, you know, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. And then you're going to hit, and you might want to make a note to yourself on this right on your flip book. You're going to hit menu, number 6, because it's statistics, number 1, and number 1 again, because we're only using one variable. We are only using one list, so you hit OK. And this is why you needed to name it. You need to pick, the names will drop down from whichever ones you've used. So since I only typed in grades, that's the only one there. And then just hit OK. Here is all of the data that you need to answer that question. Now you need to know what these symbols mean. Some of them, obviously you can figure out what minimum means, that's min. Q1 is quartile 1, Q3 is quartile 3, median, maximum. But some of these symbols up here, you might not recognize them. So the mean or the average, the symbol for that one is the X with the bar over it. So if you go back to your calculator, the average was about 83.7. That is also known as quartile 2, by the way. So when we have to do our box and whisker, we need quartiles 1, 2, and 3. So quartile 2 is the mean. The median was also on that screen, which is what they asked you to find. There is no symbol for median. It just said median. It's 84.5, so that means that's the middle number. We need quartile 1 and quartile 2 and quartile 3 for our box and whiskers. Quartile 1 was 75. Quartile 3 was 93. So now to do your box and whiskers, remember you have to make a number line. I'm just going to go up by tens, but I'm actually going to put a mark in between them to represent like 65 and then 75, but I'm only going to label every 10, just to save a little time. And then you make your box using quartiles 1, 2, and 3. So quartile 1 was at 75. The median or quartile 2 was at 83.7-ish. And quartile 3 was at 93. So again, those aren't exact because I only went up by 5s, but try your best. And then your whiskers go at your max and your min. Your max was 100, your min was 56, and you connect them to the box. So there you go, there's part A. Part B wants the interquartile range. The interquartile range is on your vocab in lesson 1. You take quartile 3 and subtract it, quartile 1 from it. And so that is 93 minus 75, which is 18. So that means it's a range of 18 points from quartile 1 up to quartile 3. Now, what should happen is ideally there should be 50% of the data should lie between quartiles 1 and 3. Now, should lie, it doesn't mean it always is exactly 50%. But the other 50% should be below quartile 1 and above quartile 3. In our case, in using this data, if we analyze that, if you count up the numbers, the number of scores that fall between quartile 1 and quartile 3, for our data that was 8 out of 18, which is 44%. So it's close to 50. It's not exactly 50, but for our data, we had about 44% fall between quartile 1 and quartile 3. Letter C wants, this might be new, I'm not sure if you've ever heard of population or any standard deviation really, but there are two symbols. So population standard deviation, the symbol for that is a sigma. It's a Greek letter, it looks something like that, and then there's usually a little x. The other type of standard deviation is a sample standard deviation, and that looks like an S. So it's kind of goes, it makes sense, S for sample, and then this kind of, I don't know if you can kind of stretch that into looking like a P-ish, like upside or sideways and flipped, I don't know. But that one is population standard deviation. So all you have to do is read the calculator. It is 11.7 for population. It says, how do you interpret the standard deviation? So what that means is on average, a data point in our set would lie 11.7 units or points away from the mean, which is the average. So that's what that means. And then we're going to use this number, 11.7, to answer D. So they want to know what percent of the scores were within 1 standard deviation of the mean. Well, to be within 1, you could be 1 above it. So like here's the average, the mean. You could be 1 above it, so you're going to add on 1 standard deviation, or you could be 1 below it. So you could also be this way, so you would actually subtract from the average. So we are going to take the average and we're going to add on 1 standard deviation, and we're going to take the average and we're going to subtract 1 standard deviation. So if you do, the average was 83.7. If you add on 11.7, that is 95.4. Sorry, the other one's 72. And then if you subtract 83.7 minus 11.7, that is 72. So now you're going to count up how many scores fall between 72 and 95.4. That is 11 out of the 18 scores. So that means 61% fall within 1 standard deviation. Now we want to go 2 standard deviations away. So I'm going to take the average and add on 2 of those 11.7s. That turns out to be a score of 107.1. And then if I subtract off 2 of those 11.7s from the mean, that is 60.3. So now count up how many scores fall between 60.3 and 107.1. That is 17 of them. That's all of them except for that the lowest one, which was 56. So that is 94%. So 94% of them fall within 2 standard deviations from the mean. So to answer these types of questions, you need to know the standard deviation. You need to know if you're working with population or sample. They'll say in the question. And then if they want one standard deviation away, you add one of those numbers to the mean and subtract, because you could fall on either side. One away just means you could be one above it or one below it, but you have to be within that range. You just count up how many are within that range and then divide that number out of how many total there are, and there's your percentage. And if you're going 2 standard deviations away, you just add or subtract 2 of those numbers from the mean and do the same thing. So that is it for this video.